Welcome back. This might be the first one you've watched. I've got no idea. I'm just assuming that this might be the second one you've watched because this is the second one that I've recorded. But it very well might not be because, of course, there are no rules and therefore the order you watch these in is entirely up to you. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this the second in our videos for the Breakthrough, a blueprint for the mind videos. I'm sitting here, it's night time this time. I've got a cup of tea, which hopefully was going to keep my nose a little bit clearer than it was in the first video, since I think I'm maybe battling a bit of the cold. But such is life, the show will go on. And as one of my old friends used to say, Dr. Theatre, I'm sure will make sure that everything is fine and all will be all right on the night, as they used to say. So, where are we going tonight? Today, this afternoon, this morning. I'm just assuming again that it's night time wherever you are, but it very well might not be. It could be 6 o'clock in the morning for all I know. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cover today something that is one of my favourite things to do. We're going to dive into it in a little bit of depth. I'm going to give you an insight into something inside your mind that I think most people that are listening to this video are going to recognise as something that's definitely going on for them, at least on some level. For some of you, potentially on a life-changing level, but let's see whether or not it is. Am I promising life change in the next 40 to 45 minutes? Perhaps I am, perhaps even just a little bit of an insight that gives you an awareness to the kind of things that your head is doing. So anyway, what are we going to talk about tonight? Tonight we're going to talk about the code. You know, we've talked about the code before. We've talked about the code in the book. There's a whole chapter. I picked up my tea and put it back down again there, just in case you're wondering what's happening just below camera. I decided that I was going to take a drink, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to. That may happen a few times. You're just going to have to stick with me. Go and get yourself a cup of tea. Honestly, pause the video. Go and get one. Join me. In fact, let me take a drink just now, right? Okay, and honestly, well, you go and make yourself a cup. On you go. Go on. Just go make yourself a cup. Honestly. Back. Got one. If you're American and watching this, of course, you probably don't drink tea and probably think, oh, isn't that cute and so British? But anyway, we'll get on to that another time. So, what do I mean by the code? Right, well, one of the things that I experience quite often with people is that people will say to me, oh my God, I think I'm turning into my mother, or I think I'm turning into my father, and this will be a thing. I experience many people who think that they're turning into their mums or dads, but have you ever wondered why that might be? Why is it that all of a sudden when we get to a certain age, we find that our behaviours and the things that we do and some of the actions that we have, the things that we say, which normally are the things that freak us out a little bit, and perhaps even how we're bringing up our children or doing our jobs or whatever it is, start to remind us of our parents? Well, one of the things that we talk about in the book, of course, is the fact that there are 3 periods, if you like. Now, this is just one model. It's one of my favourite models. I must admit, I use it all the time. I teach it to anybody that I get the opportunity to teach it to. But there are 3 periods in our emotional, psychological development that are key. We have the imprint period, 0 to 7. So from birth to 7, you're learning, you know, the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, all of these types of things. You're looking at your parents, the people who are around you, you look up and you go, oh my God, they're amazing, they're like God to you. And therefore you start to soak in exactly what they do because they must be the ones that know what they're doing. Of course, in later life we find out that's not always the case, but definitely at the start up until about 7, then these are the people that seem to get the shit and know what's going down, you know, that kind of thing. So anyway, 0 to 7, this imprint period, very, very critical in terms of our development. Then what happens is we hit this 7 to 14. Now, 7 to 14 is a great time. It tends to be a time of imagination and aspiration and hope, because really we believe between 7 and 14 we believe that we can be anything. There's a great little test, I can't remember exactly when it was done or who it was done by, but where they ask very young children what it was that they wanted to do as a job. We actually reference some of this in the book. And what they found was that from 0 to 7, people have these crazy ideas, very young kids, these things about being spaceships and dragons and princesses. And then between 7 and 14, as we watch the years go up and start to rise as we go from 7 to 14, we start to get a much more solid view of what we want to do. But where does that come from? Well, this is why we call it the modelling period. Because what we do is we look again at the people around us, we look up to all the people, our role models, and we go, right, well, this is what I want. I want some of what they have. I want their success, or I want their happiness, or I want their car, or I want their house, I want their wife, I want their husband, I want their relationship, whatever it may be. And we get this fascination with, again, how older people are running their lives. Yet we think, okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? Some interesting things can happen in this period, of course, because we're looking up at these people thinking, well, how do I get there? How do I get to that stage where my relationship, my house, my car, my job, my whatever it is on the same level as them? And this can create some interesting things. Let's imagine that all of a sudden you start watching somebody on television. You're 8 years old and you think, I want to be as rich as them. Yet over here, you have a little voice that's talking to you. It could be mum, it could be dad, it could be big brother, it could be your friends, it could be just a social thing that's around you, an economic thing that's around you, to say, you'll never achieve that. You'll never achieve that. You're never going to get that. People like you don't. What does that do to a young child's values? What does it do to a young child's code? If you're somebody who values excitement and aspiration at 9 years old, how quickly could it be quashed by somebody that tells you, oh no, do you know what you'd be better doing is going for something secure. You just settle in, where people like us belong. There used to be an old thing about Glasgow, and I'm sure it's true of very many other areas in the UK, again I would imagine in the world as well, where it used to be, the whole thing about remember where you come from, that type of thing. I mean, it's a crazy notion now to us. Well, I'd hope it's a crazy notion to you. It should be a crazy notion because, remember where you come from. What's that got to do with anything? Now, in the past, there is potential where maybe it did, because the place that you came from would tend to govern what career you could have, because the opportunities just weren't there sometimes to be able to get the jobs that certain people had. University was out of reach for many, many people. But nowadays university, and I know this from a lot of work I do in schools, university is seen as actually pretty much the norm, which in its own way is actually a problem, but we'll get on to that in a little second. 7 to 14, this modelling period. So whereas the 0 to 7 want to be a spaceship, they want to be a dog, they want to be the cat, they want to be a dragon princess. How cool would that be? I'm pretty sure if I had another child, I would look for a 5-year-old girl who wanted to be a dragon princess. I think that would be pretty awesome. But anyway, it become perfectly clear, well, maybe it wouldn't, but I would imagine it would become clear some point later on in life that actually being a dragon princess was perhaps one of the more difficult career choices. It's a bit niche, to be honest. I don't know of any Scottish universities offering a dragon princess degree or any qualification of the type, but maybe it's just not very well known. Anyway, what happens between 7 to 14 is these more, what would we call them? I don't want to call them realistic, because they could still be massively aspirational, but these dreams start to develop based on all the people that we see around us. Now we hit my favourite period in these 3 periods of development. We hit socialisation. 14 years old up until the age of 21, everything goes tits up and the whole thing starts to change. Because what's happened is you've spent 14 years looking at all the people around you and thinking, I'm going to be like this, I love this is good, this is right, this is wrong, this is bad, whatever, this is the greatest thing ever, this person is the greatest thing ever. And then when you hit round about 14, remember that these things, just as a wee aside, these things aren't set in stone. It's not like your 14th birthday, boom, and all of a sudden everything changes. Some people, they could be entering this socialisation period maybe even as young as 12. Some people might not get into it until perhaps even the early times of 16. You just never know. It's just a rough guide. You have a decision on where you hit that period. I would reckon probably around about 14 for most people. But anyway, we hit the socialisation period. 2 questions inside your head. Who am I? How do I fit in? Huge. absolutely massive questions. Now all of a sudden, all those people that you've based your life on, it's not to say that they're not important, they're still massively important, especially some of them. I would hope, if you're fortunate enough, that your parents perhaps have still been a massive influence on your life, perhaps even right up to 21, maybe even still now. I don't know what age you are, perhaps if you're in adulthood now, maybe there's still an influence in somebody that you connect to and get valuable information from. If you do, that's fantastic. Perhaps for others, then not so much. But somewhere around about 14, you ask these two questions: who am I? How do I fit in? And all of a sudden, everything begins to change. Because it's not about all those people that you've been looking at anymore. Your principal guide to how life should be is the people who are all around you, your peers, the people on the same level as you, normally around the same age. Again, social, economic factors can come in at that point as well. And all of a sudden now you're somebody who is looking around you going, well, do I want to fit in with this group over here, or do I want to fit in with that group over there? Or do I want to try and somehow get a balance somewhere where all of a sudden I can fit somewhere in the middle? These things can be very, very challenging. I'm sure you know that. I mean, in my own story, which actually I told you in chapter 6 of the book, but just to dive into it a little bit, being the outsider, I moved school when I was about 13. Moving school just before this period of development started at least gave me a little bit of settling time before it really kicked in. I must admit, I would reckon for me I was probably one of the later starters, so I would reckon I was probably somewhere round about the 15-ish mark by the time it actually really kicked in full throttle for me. But anyway, whenever it kicked in, didn't matter. I moved school round about that age. I never quite felt that fit in. I, of course, grew massively in height. I know you can't tell because I'm sitting down, but I'm actually 8'2". Well, actually, I'm not. I'm about 6'2", but anyway, I'm still very tall, which I wasn't at a certain age, and all of a sudden grew very tall. Hair changed colour to a kind of strawberry blondie shade that some people would have classed as ginger or red, but I still say it was a strawberry blondie shade. I had my wants. I wanted to be a chef, all these different things, but still it was this idea of trying to fit in. I didn't know where. I never felt as if I completely fitted in. The popular kids, because I was one of the youngest in my year, so what I call the popular kids, they were all out drinking, but to me I was still like a wee boy. It just didn't appeal to me at all. They're all going out to clubs and to pubs, trying to get into places underage. This is something that I wouldn't do for another potentially 2, almost 3 years. And they were way, way ahead of me in terms of development. So in terms of fitting in, actually, when I was at home, I fitted in actually with a lot of my little brother's friends. So my 2 little brothers, I started playing football with their friends because they were actually closer to me than the people that I was in school with. It's an interesting development that kind of continued for many years until probably I was about kind of 23, 24 when everything started to level out. But again, we'll come on to that a little bit later. So that was just my experience of socialisation, this idea of not fitting in, making bad choices. Round about 17, of course, as I say the story in the book, what happened was that my head got turned and all of a sudden I found a music scene and another scene that I could get really heavily involved in. Have a think back to when you were 14 to 21. We're going to come back to this later because it's a key period. Have a think about how you developed at that time. What are the key values that you created up until about the age of your late teens, early 20s? It can be a fascinating thing to look back on ourselves and see how we developed. On the first video on clearing the string, one of the things that I mentioned was about this hero's secret idea. This is also where the hero's secret comes from. Not only is it about the pearls that are on your necklace and the things that you're looking back on, but it's very much about this idea of our value creation. What values did we create? So for instance, if really crap stuff happens to you between the ages of say 7 and 21, let's imagine it goes on for a long time, you may learn the value of security, of stability, and therefore now as an adult you might be somebody that's sitting there thinking, oh no, we don't rock the boat. I've met people who, and I'm sure you know them, and it might even be you. Can I just say there's nothing wrong with what I'm about to say? It's just one way of living your life. I have met people who have lived in the same house, the actual same house, since they were 10 years old. You know, they grew up, they got married, they bought it from their mother or father or whoever it was. Maybe even they moved in with their mother and father in one particular case. And then what happens is they take it over once their mum or dad passes, and then they bring up their family in it, and it's like this traditional family home that goes back years and years. That is going to affect you in here. That type of thing, that type of tradition. Something that, just in case you're watching it, if you happen to be a farmer or know anybody that comes from that farming or agriculture background, this tends to be a huge thing for them. I work with a lot of farmers, and all of a sudden it's like this tradition. This they find that the past is very much something that governs their now and then potentially the future. These ideas of land being handed down has affected their values. How were yours affected? Have a think about it just now. Think about it. I'm going to take a drink of tea while you think about it, okay? So have a think about it. How, especially between the ages of, say, 14-ish, somewhere around about there. So for if you're in England, Wales, that type of place, you're talking what's that? Round about year 8, somewhere about there, year 9 perhaps. If you're Scottish, then this is talking about 3rd year, somewhere around about there, just before we sit our exams. What were the things that were happening between then and your 21st birthday that you think still affect you now? Got some? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? An interesting thought. I could go into my story in much more detail, but you can read it in the book, and I'll tell you exactly how it affected me, I mean, in some detail. But, you know, this is the whole point about our values. They're getting changed and influenced by people who are external to us. Now, the thing that changes at 21 isn't that all of a sudden it becomes locked. So we don't have this kind of, all of a sudden that's us, we're done, and who we are at 21 is who we'll be for the rest of our life. Not at all. It's just that all of a sudden we start to change the way that those values begin to be influenced. This, of course, is when the big bangs and drip feeds come in. So any big bang, any drip feed, that's going to affect your code in some way. It's going to affect your values. The question is how? You know, what is it that changed you from 21? So there is a field of thought that says, for instance, that your career values aren't established until you're about 28. So your code for what you're looking for from a job, from your career, isn't established until you're about 28 years old. And then that makes total sense. When you think about the string of pearls, you have no pearls on your necklace with which to base any judgment about what you would like as a career. Isn't it crazy then that we ask young people to decide at around 14 what they want to do, well, not maybe for the rest of their lives, but definitely for the foreseeable future. And all of a sudden, you know, one thing leads to another, and you go and do a university degree, and then you come out at 21 and you've got an honours degree, and you go, what the hell do I do with this? I have no interest in this anymore. I was actually talking to someone just last week who has been to a university here in Scotland, and she's done a creative degree. So she's done a degree in an art subject. I can't remember the exact name of the degree. But what she said to me was that now what she wants to do is, funnily enough with what we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, she wants to do agriculture. But nobody told her when she was in school that there was such a degree as an agriculture degree, so she never knew she could do it, so therefore she didn't. I mean, is that not nuts? You know, all of a sudden now she's getting to a place where she thinks this is what I want to do in my life, but now she's already got her degree and she's already finished. Now, of course it's not the end of the world. Now, she can retrain, she can do postgrad, and we were talking about many options that she's got if that's a particular field that she wants to go into. Now, here's an important thing. What I actually did with her, I'm going to ask you to do in just a few minutes, okay? So what I did with her, to work out exactly what the best next step should be, I did with her. And what I want you to do is I want you to go and grab, or I'm going to do with you, I'm going to do with you in just a few minutes. So I would say, if you can, pause the video just now if you need to, and grab yourself a pen and a piece of paper. So if you haven't already, grab yourself a pen and a piece of paper. I'm going to talk you through some other stuff first. but it's going to get to a point where I'm going to ask you, if you want to, again, I can't make you do anything, but if you want to, you can pause the video and write some stuff down on a piece of paper and actually do a little exercise during this video that I promise that is very, very powerful. It's exceptionally powerful if you have a coach to lead you through it, but it can be exceptionally powerful because you've now got a coach to lead you through it. So I'm going to tell you exactly what to do and exactly how to make the most of the exercise. But anyway, so your values continue to change as you grow, as these emotional incidents happen to you. So as these big bangs, these drip feeds happen, our values will shift depending on what's happening. I use the example in the book as if we were to put twins into the army, for instance, or one into the army, one into a creative degree or a creative path. Would they be the same? Would you expect them to be the same? Well, of course not. This is how life affects us. If you get married at 18 to your childhood sweetheart and then at 29 all of a sudden have a messy divorce, then of course that's going to change you. In the same way, if you break up with your childhood sweetheart when you're 18 and then spend the next 10 years single and then meet them again on a beach in the middle of nowhere and instantly fall madly in love again and then have the relationship of your dreams for the rest of your life, you really think that that moment at 28, 29, whenever that is, when in my made up story, isn't going to belt you and completely change who you are as a person? Of course it is. This is exactly how we work. We are emotional creatures. So to deny that's a bit mental, to be perfectly honest, to coin a Scottish phrase. You know, you have to accept that you're an emotional creature. Every decision that you make, can I say it one more time? Would you mind? Every decision that you make is emotionally based. And then what you do is you go into your mind and you back it up with a bit of logic. You know, so you say, well, the reason I'm doing this is because it's a very sensible approach, you know, in my career, and what I want to do is I want to make the most of my opportunities while I'm still young. But actually, emotionally, it gives you excitement or security or happiness or whatever it is, that's something in there that stirs when you think about taking that leap, whatever that may be. Get my gist? I'm hoping you do, because I promise you it's happening to you every day. Now, one of the things that I was most keen to talk about in this video is something that, if you can understand, as I said at the beginning, can be totally life-changing. This isn't the thing you need the pen and the piece of paper for, by the way. That's coming in a few minutes. But this is something that can happen because of our code and the way the code works. So, imagine it like this. As you grow and as you grow into an adult, your code goes into contexts. We talk about this in the book. So some of the big ones are like your life, for instance, your relationship, your friendships, your money, your career, obviously, your health, perhaps even things like your spiritual life, if you happen to have one, whatever that is. All of these things have their own little bundles of values that have been created over time because of everything that we've just talked about. Now, what happens if they end up clashing? What happens if they end up, you know, not exactly doing what they're meant to do? Have you ever had the experience where you feel as if you're fighting with yourself? I would almost guarantee that you have. I think every adult that is watching this must have had the experience at some point of feeling as if they are fighting with themselves. You know, like a devil and angel on your shoulder, like a side of me, a part of me. I don't know how you would describe it, but it's something like that. I mean, think about it just now. There must be a decision that you're trying to make in your life, excuse me, whether it be something like giving up smoking, whether it be, I don't know, losing weight, whether it be changing job, whether it be something to do with your relationship, whether it maybe even, I'm going to go for the biggies here, where it maybe even is something like you experience the occasional or perhaps even frequent anxiety or panic attack, something like that, or anxious moment, where it's almost as if something takes control. I remember a very early client I had, I just need to take another drink of tea here just to clear my throat. If you've got one, now's the time. Join me. Cheers. You know, let's share tea. Let's have a moment together of teeness. Quality. So I remember a client, a very early client of mine, that when we were working together, it was actually, I was working on something else, and I think I was working with her son. And she happened to say to me in the end of one of the sessions that could she talk to me? Could she talk to me on her own? And I'm like, of course, I've no problem with that at all. And when she sat down, she said, look, I've got something strange to talk to you about, because it's like I'm almost possessed. Now, this isn't going where you think it's going, can I just say? It's going somewhere else. But she says, it's like I'm possessed. I have this secret that I've not told anybody, and I think you might be able to help with. Now, at this point, I'm like, okay, she has a secret. I wonder what it is. She looks like a stable family. I wonder if there's something sordid happening. I was going, oh, this could be exciting. And actually, it was to do with biscuits. I promise, it was just to do with biscuits. Specifically, it was to do with a type of biscuits here in the UK called Jaffa cakes. But anyway, here's where the story goes. If you are American or anything outside the UK, I don't know where Jaffa cakes are sold. If you've never experienced a Jaffa cake, it's like a chocolatey orange cake biscuit thing. They're awesome. Find some in some store somewhere. Try one. They're special. Seriously special. But anyway, what she said was that she was hiding these biscuits around the house. And what would happen is she would feel as if something came over her. She wouldn't know what it was. Something came over her where all of a sudden she didn't feel like herself anymore, and she would basically eat this whole packet of biscuits, secretly stored away from her husband and children, in seconds. She would make herself sick by forcing this whole packet into her mouth, and she was disgusted at herself. She couldn't believe that she kept on doing this, but it was like somebody else was in charge. Have you ever felt like that? Now, not maybe about biscuits, but where it feels like somebody else in charge. I used to have a description of my life. I used to say that it felt as if I was about 1 foot back, 2 feet back inside my own head, watching someone else live my life for me. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Maybe a bit extreme, but I mean a lot of people who would recognise and empathise with that thought process. But anyway, where does this come from? Right, so next time you have a dilemma, this is how dilemmas happen. When you're very, very young, imagine like your mind is like this. Okay, so I talk a couple of times in the book about how mind and body are created, right? So it's like this, and everything's locked in. And especially when you're very, very young, up until about the age of about 2, this is like solid, massively solid. You're actually quite selfish up until about the age of 2. You don't tend to really think about other people's feelings or emotions. You want to know what they think sometimes, but only if it helps you. You're really interested in them giving you knowledge. So you're somebody who's quite hungry for knowledge, hungry for information, and you'll take it from people. Now, the example of this is quite obvious. If a 2-year-old wants to go over to the other side of the room, as the parents in here and listening to this will know, then a 2-year-old will go over to the other side of the room. Now, your mind goes through some stages of development after that, but the big key one is that round about a certain age, your mind for the very first time, rather than being like this, rather than perhaps looking out to everybody else for advice and looking at that kind of array of people that surround you, what your mind will do is your mind will go like this. And it will split and it will give you 2 ideas. It will give you 2 options, 2 things that it could do. So for instance, let me give you a 3-year-old example. So you're 3 years old, somebody comes up and hands you a pen and says, draw on the wall. You've never experienced this before. If you'd experienced that before, then you would have memories, you'd have pearls on the string, and everything would be fine, you'd know exactly what to do. But let's imagine that you're 3 years old, you've never experienced this option before, as I've never even considered drawing on the wall until this moment, but now it's been put in front of you. Your mind goes, what do we do? One side of you goes, that sounds awesome. I have never drawn on the wall before. I never knew that was a possibility. This must be great fun. The other one turns round and says, what are you doing? Now, given all the knowledge that we have, this is going to get us into trouble. But this one goes, yeah, but it's going to be really exciting. I don't think we get into trouble. Nobody's ever told us not to draw on the wall. And then this one says, yeah, but just because nobody's told us to draw on the wall, I'm pretty sure that some people have told us not to draw on the television, and maybe that's the same. Yeah, but we've not been told to draw on the wall. Yeah, but and you just jump from side to side. Now, this all happens like that. I mean, in almost literally less than a heartbeat, this whole thing can occur. Changes in your mind occur, and what happens is you go and do something. Let's imagine that you draw on the wall, right? So let's just imagine that you do draw on the wall. What happens is that these two things come back together again. You now have a pearl on your necklace, and what happens is that you toddle off into your world having done that thing. What then happens is, depending on what this memory is, whether you did or whether you didn't draw on the wall, if you did and you get into trouble, then the next time somebody comes up and says, do you want to draw on the wall? Of course you're going to say no. Of course, if you got drawn on the wall and got away with it, you get all the concepts, you get all the different factors that could play into this, and all the different ways that this little memory could develop from this into this, depending on whether you did, whether you didn't, whether you get caught, whether you didn't. These aren't the important times. This is still how you make decisions about the things that you've never experienced. If I was to ask you to make a decision just now about something that you haven't ever experienced before, then what would happen is that your mind would do this. Split into two. Just to give you a couple of options. Let me ask you to consider something as if I'm making you a real offer. Okay? Let me ask you something to imagine that this is a real offer. I am going to give you 10 million British pounds, right? So try this on. I'm going to give you 10 million British pounds if, and this is going to take some people out of the game, but I want you to have a think about what it would be like if it was true, if you split up your current relationship. So you just walk away. I don't care how long you've been married for, I don't care how long you've been going out for, I don't care whether you've got children, I don't care anything about that. I am offering you £10 million to break up your relationship. Now, some people, instantly, there will be no dilemma in that at all. There will be either a very clear yes, or I'm hoping a very clear no. But for some of you, what will have happened is that this will have happened. Let me make the same offer on something else. I'll give you £10 million if you tattoo the cover of my book onto some part of your body. Please do not do that. This is not a real offer. I do not have 10 million quid if you come back to me and go, by the way, look at my tattoo. I did it. So this is not a real offer. But you get my drift. Would you do it? Would you do 10 million quid to tattoo your name on your cheek? I don't know. Would you do it? What I'm just trying to do is just to force your head into this crazy place where all of a sudden we have a dilemma and we think, right, okay, would I really do that? Would I not do it? But this is happening to you all the time. It's happening to you all the time. Let me give you a very obvious example. This is an example that I experience a lot, something that happens a lot for clients. So, therefore, there's a very, very high chance that for you, it could have happened in something similar to this type of way. Something traumatic happens. I don't know what it is. Let's take it imagination. It's one of the most common things is a relationship breakup, or potentially being put in a situation where you don't know what to do. For instance, somebody gets violent or something like that. But let's do the relationship breakup for simplicity's sake. It's not a nice relationship breakup. You're going around your life, everything is fine as far as you're concerned, and then one day your partner comes home and goes, boom, I'm leaving. And it's like out of absolute nowhere. Now, these are the points at which this gets stuck. I mean, this is happening every single day. Every single moment you experience something new, it's happening all the time. Which, depending on your job, depending on the way you live your life, could be hundreds of times a day. But when we put a lot of emotion in, what happens is this happens and then it gets stuck. One side goes, in my example, what do you mean they're leaving? Oh my God. What am I going to do? Perhaps even thinks, what if? What if I never meet anybody again? What if I'm not good enough? What if? Why are they leaving me? Is it because I'm too ugly? Is it because I'm not smart enough? Is it because I'm not clever enough? Is it just because I'm not enough? And the other side goes, don't listen. This has nothing to do with you. Everything's going to be fine. Now, this is hard to hear in the instance of emotion and all these things clearing. So it tends to take a little while before somebody goes, hang on a minute, what's changed? But this is happening instantly on that big bang happening. Instantly, this is already there. It's just potentially difficult to listen. Or what might happen, and what happens for a lot of people, is that they will choose the kind of very emotional negative side. Another side tries to rationalise and says, do you know what, well, you're better off without them, and you're a strong person, you're a good person, you'll meet someone new, everything will be fantastic. But that's quiet. It's a tiny little voice, a million miles away. You can't really even hear it. It's so quiet. But the other side's really loud, as it tells you, you know, that this is tragic and how your life is over, and it starts running what ifs and what ifs and what ifs. And before you know it, what you have is you have two sides fighting. Now, actually what these are two little packets of code. For instance, one side looking for security and the other side looking for, I don't know, freedom, independence, something like that. All of a sudden what happens is these two bundles of code begin to fight. You experienced that before? What I normally see is that for people, they normally recognise it because it acts like a switch. It's like a switch. It's like you can be good. Everything's fantastic. I'm having a fine day. I'm having a great fun. And work was going well. Everything was. And then in an instant, you can be over here. And all of a sudden, everything's terrible again. You can be having a panic attack, feeling flat, feeling depressed. You can be angry. This could be any extreme of emotion, and that's how you tend to recognise these extremes of emotion. I call it polar. No, not bipolar, obviously, but just call it polar. It's like one end to the other end in an instant, and you can flick back in exactly the same way. People will quite often talk, like the biscuits lady, as if it feels as if I've been taken over by something or someone that's not me. I mean, isn't that crazy that we let this stuff happen? But for many of us, we think at that point that we're broken. If you've watched the whole thing about clearing the string in the other video, then you'll learn this thing about I am. And we start to think this is who we are. Let's say that you go into this side all the time. All of a sudden you start to think of yourself as not good enough or anxious or whatever it may be. Of course, there's little fleeting moments where you think you're the best thing ever and you think you're amazing and you deserve better. But that voice is a little quieter. Now here's where it gets life-changing. I want you just to imagine for me a couple of concepts, okay? Just a couple of concepts for you to imagine. There's a thing that we do, and one of my favourite things to do is to sort these internal conflicts out. Let me see if I can just help you a little bit to understand where they come from. Number one, both sides are trying to help you. Both sides are trying to help you. This is this whole thing about to be a friend with your mind. You don't be enemies with your mind. Everything that happens inside, everything is trying to help. Everything is trying to push you towards a positive destination, wherever that destination may be, even if the behaviour seems strange. How could an anxiety attack be positive, Brian? That's what people say to me. How can an anxiety attack possibly be a positive thing? But think about why you get anxious. Let me ask just now, whether you're somebody who does anxiety or not, what's anxiety about? Another drink of tea while you're thinking about it, okay? So I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to think about it. What positive purpose can anxiety possibly have? Now, I'm hoping that most people that are watching this will have come up with a very obvious answer of protection and safety. I mean, imagine living a life where you never got anxious. Some people think that sounds like some sort of utopia, but to be honest, anxiety can sometimes be one of the most positive emotions you can ever have. It's not nice to feel, but it's the thing that makes sure that you know what you're doing. If you didn't have anxiety and somebody gave you a parachute and said jump off that cliff, you know, would anxiety be the thing that makes you just check that definitely the ropes and that everything's properly secured before you jump? Or if you didn't have anxiety, would you just jump and then halfway down go, oh, perhaps I should have checked that buckle? You know how many performers talk about having anxiety before they walk out on stage? As somebody who speaks in public often and speaks to relatively large audiences, I promise you that anxiety is one of the most common and normal emotions that you will ever feel. It's normally about protection and safety. Have you got everything you need? Is everything okay? Now, if the answer is yes, then it's brilliant to continue, but that's what an anxiety attack's trying to do. So an anxiety attack or anxiety of any type, even think about, I'm just talking anxiety, by the way, you can include any emotion into this that you want. And I promise you'll always find that it's a positive thing at the end. But anyway, let's just continue with anxiety. An anxiety attack is extreme protection. Imagine that right here, right, there's a big red emergency switch. Inside your mind, what happens is right here, it sits with its hand hovering above it. It's looking at it going, did I push it? Did I push it? Did I push it yet? Did I push it yet? Did I push it yet? Oh my God. And anything that it thinks looks as if it could be dangerous. Even if that thing's not there, it's just possible that it could happen. Hence the reason, as we talk about in the book, that anxiety is based on what if. Soon as that what if happens, that part of your mind pushes the button, you're in protection mode, and therefore it wants to shut you down. Now, of course, the other side's all about confidence and all those things. But anyway, let me just ask you to consider that whatever it is that's happening on both of these sides is a positive thing. So, what would it be? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is for you. I mean, actually, what I would do with someone if I got to anxiety being about protection and safety, I'd then ask them, and if you were protected and safe, then what would that get you? How would that make you feel? I want to go higher than that. Normally to something like happiness or peace or confidence. You know, think about anger. Let's carry anger through just for a second. Imagine somebody having mad anger, like temper tantrums, boom, and all of a sudden they explode. Why do you do that? Well, I want to protect myself. I want to make sure that people are listening. Why do you want people to listen? Because I think I have good things to say. And if they listen, how would that make you feel? Oh, it'd make me feel validated. Excellent. And if you feel validated, what would that get for you? Oh, well, if I feel validated, I'd feel calmer and I'd feel happier. So actually, you're angry so that you can feel calmer and happier. Yeah, I suppose I am. I'm angry because nobody's listening, and if people listened, I'd feel calm and happy. So I suppose, yeah, I'm angry because I want to be calmer. And this is the point where it gets life-changing. I absolutely kid you not. This is the point where it gets life-changing. Do this for me just now. This isn't a pen and paper exercise, but if you want to, you can stop the video for a little second so you can just have some clear space inside your head. The question I want to ask you is, what does that get you? I want you to make sure that it's a positive thing. If you're not getting a positive thing, then let me just add one more word. What do you think your mind is trying to get you? What do you think your mind is trying to get you when it does that thing? So when it does anxiety or anger or upset or whatever it is, when it goes all flat and down, when it thinks about the bad stuff, when it does whatever it is, what is it that it's trying to get you if it had a positive purpose? And what you tend to find is that there's a gap between what it is doing and what it's trying to get. Remember I say in the book, I can't remember which chapter it's in, but there's a point in the book where I say that people tend to judge themselves on their behaviours but others by their intentions. Others by their behaviours and themselves by their intentions. Apologies for that, I'll get my own quote right. So you judge others by their behaviours and ourselves by our intentions. I'm going to get it wrong again there almost. Did you get that? Anyway, okay, so I've now got it. Okay, I've remembered my own thing that I wrote down. Okay, so just to clarify, we judge others by their behaviours and ourselves by our intentions. This is why I wanted to make such a point of that in the book, because we do that to ourselves all the time. We see anxiety as a bad thing because it's a behaviour without never ever really considering what the intention is. This becomes life-changing when you start to realise, number one, that whatever it is that is your extremes of emotions, your devil and angel, that both of them are looking for something positive. And the second concept, because I said there would be two concepts, is that actually they're both after the same thing. Think about it. They are both after exactly the same thing, I promise. If you realise that actually the little devil and angel that sit on your shoulder, the one that does the anxiety side of you, the one that does the confident side, whatever it is, the one that does the angry side, the one that does the peaceful side, the one that does the loving side, the one that does the detached side, the one that does the emotion, the one that does no emotion, the one that feels, the one that rationalises, whatever it is, the one that works too hard and never stops, and then the one that wants to just take it all easy. It doesn't matter what they are. Once you work out what their intention is, you'll find out that actually for both of them, they've both got exactly the same top intention, because that top intention will be one of the key parts of your code. So for instance, in anxiety, quite often we find that both sides, the anxious side and the confident side, or at least the more peaceful side, the side that looks at you when you're having a panic attack going, What are you doing? Everything's going to be okay. Just calm down. Everything's going to be fine. The bit that afterwards goes, well, that was a bit ridiculous, wasn't it? Even though at the time, of course, it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt totally real. It felt like something that was really going to hurt you. And therefore, your body and your mind did exactly what it had to do. If you think about both of those sides, you will realise that both of them are after exactly the same thing. Normally, happiness. When it's anxiety, I must admit, in my experience, most of the time, it's looking for you to be happy. Often, the anxious side is looking for safety and protection, because then you can feel relief. Relief equals calm. Calm means you can be more yourself. Because you're more yourself, all of a sudden you can be happier. You can have a think about it and a play with it. I promise you, once you realise that both of these things are after the same thing, it's amazing the type of things that can happen. The magic that can happen inside your mind is all of a sudden you achieve like it's what I would call a type of balance. You know, it's like a somewhere in the middle. It's like finding a blend of both. It can be a massively, massively powerful moment. But what I'm going to do just to finish this video off, and again, I said 45 minutes at the start. I think we're probably already at about 45 minutes, so maybe it's going to be closer to an hour for this one. There you go, bonus content. Should I call this bonus content? Should I say, here we go, this is special bonus content on Breakthrough, a blueprint for the mind? I don't know if I should. I'm just enjoying myself. I hope you're enjoying this video too, because I'm enjoying it. I love explaining this stuff. I'm going to get you to do one last exercise. Okay, now it's time for the pen and paper. We talk about this a little bit in the book, and we talk about how to actually begin to learn what your code is. And what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to write some things down. And what I want you to write down is I want you to choose a context of your life. Think of the big ones I said earlier on. You can go for life in general if you want to. That's like the big chunk, and that can be a great thing. But then you can also go for career or relationship or finance or spirituality or health or friendships or whatever it is are the areas of your life that you think are affecting you right now. I don't know what it is. Just go for it. Right. So choose one. Somewhere, especially if you want to find out a few answers. You know, if you're thinking, okay, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. Got it? Okay, now, here's what I want you to do. Pen and paper. You can do it in your head if you want, but it's just difficult because you might get more than 7 things. And therefore, all of a sudden, your mind might become a little bit cluttered. So it's sometimes easier, even if you just write them down at random. Like, just grab a wee piece of paper here and just a pen and just blah, 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 blah. You can do it while I speak if you want. I'm just suggesting that you stop the video just to give yourself a couple of minutes. Question is, in that context of your life, what is important? Now, what is important? Now, I want you to remember from the book. It's okay if you've not read it, so I'll remind you just now. But if you have read it, I want you to remember from the book that all of these code words, will be feeling words. So you'll be able to precede whatever you write down with I feel. And they should be words or short statements, not a big paragraph. So for instance, you cannot feel money. You cannot feel money. You can feel what money gets you, whether that be security, independence, whatever it is. So if you're doing career and you think money's important, I want you to ask yourself, no, what does money get me until you get to, or how does money make me feel? If you have money, how does money make you feel? Does that make sense? Okay, so whether you stop it or not, what I want you to do is I want you just to start writing them down. What I'll do if you're not stopping is I'm going to give you maybe about 20 seconds just now to write down at least the first 5 words that come into your mind. While we have this 20 seconds, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have more tea, so go for it. What's important to you about that context? Just write down the words that come to mind or think about them in your head. Think about your relationship or your career or your friends. What are the things that are important? What would you say? Look for words like security, independence, freedom, happiness, easy, connection, love, passion, I don't know, friendship. Seem to be going down a more relationship kind of way here. If it was career, it might be things like, is it important that you're in charge? And quite a common one to find out that actually you like status. You like making decisions. Is it important that you're the boss? Or is it important that you're not the boss? Some people it's important that it's the last thing in the world they want would be to be the boss. whatever you've written down, it's perfect. If you'd stopped the video, by the way, that gave you just a little more time there just to write some things down. My thing, if I was doing this with a client, I'd normally say somewhere between 7 and 10. I'd look for about 7 and 10 words. So if you stop the video, that's where to go with it. Now that you've got the list, I want you just to take a look at it and realise that what you've started to get here is the foundation of your code. This is how you make every single decision in your life based on these feelings. In this context, of course. So if you've done career, this isn't how you make your relationship values, and vice versa. In fact, what people can find sometimes is that, especially, let's use career and relationship as an example, these things can be massively different. Somebody who loves security and routine and planning in their career can be the very person who wants the complete opposite in their relationship and wants freedom and independence and spontaneity in the relationship. So don't get too caught up. I mean, it's you. I'm asking you about you. I'm not asking you to have a right answer or a wrong answer. But this is how you base it every decision you have in your life. Your mind has an experience, so this is the trigger. Remember we talked about the trigger, thought, feeling, action, right? So you have the trigger, whatever it is, the trigger incident. That thought that happens inside your head is based on that code that you have just written down on that piece of paper. I promise. So for instance, you have the trigger, you have a thought inside your head, that feeling also triggers off, and that thought and that feeling work together to say, am I going to get? So let me give you an example. If I was to offer you a new job tomorrow and say, by the way, there's an interview ready set up for you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for a brand new job. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is a job where you're going to have a massive amount of security. It's going to require a massive amount of planning. It's very, very routined. It's the same pretty much every day, but in a very, very cool way. I mean, it's like a really exciting job. Even though it's routine, you're going to be making a huge difference. But you are pretty much going to do the same thing every Monday now for the next 5 years, the same thing every Tuesday for the next 5 years. There's a chance to be promoted at the end of that 5 years to a really incredible job. And the money is £3,000 a year more than you're currently on. Thoughts. Is this a job that you're running in tomorrow going, where's my interview? Where's my interview? Or are you like, oh no? You see, this is the point. Here we go. So let me explain. If you're somebody who loves routine and planning, maybe even to people who might be a bit ambitious and might think about that kind of promotion at the kind of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that they could put up with that pain to get to that place. At the moment you're running this thought, this interview through your mind is comparing it to your code to see whether or not it thinks it's going to get it met. If it does, it will give you all those feelings will tick. It'll go, yes, these are good feelings. You'll feel pleasure, and therefore you move on. And now all of a sudden you're behaving and you're in the interview giving it your best. In the same way, there'll be plenty of people that listen to this, perhaps again you, who have turned round, and when I say about this, you'll do the same thing every Monday, will think, that is my idea of hell, that is not happening. Now, I want you to do one last stage with me. Does this all make sense? I hope it does. If it doesn't, drop me an email. I'm happy to explain. There's much more information, of course, in the chapter in the book called Cracking the Code, where you can actually really get the background and the simplicity of how this works. Remember that these videos are designed to take you a little bit deeper, so I'm assuming that you've already read the book to get a bit of a level of knowledge. Okay, so if you're maybe a bit confused, go and read the chapter in the book, and I promise it will fill it all in, and it will make total sense to you. But let's imagine, therefore, in fact, let's not imagine anything else because I'm probably cluttering your head. Let me just take you to the last stage. What I want you to do is, I want you to take that list. Again, if you need to, please pause the video. And what I want you to do is I want you to put it in order. Okay, so when you put it in order, not every value is equal. They're not all just on a list and they're all equal. Some of these values are more important than others. So if I was to ask you to look at your list or think of your list inside your head, wherever you've stored it, where is your number one value? What is the most important thing on that list? Even if you want to, keep going with this, put a wee 1 beside it or whatever, or inside your head, put that to the top of the list. Now, what do you think comes next? What comes next? Okay, keep going. Keep going. Number 3, number 4, number 5, however many you've got. Even if it's only 3 or 4, I'd hope that you get 7 to 10. That would be amazing if you did. That's the full elicitation, as I would call it. If you get 7 to 10 on your piece of paper, that you've done fab. What I want you to do is I want you to write down as many as you can and put them into order. Now, you ready for the next bit? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to test them. Look at your list or think about it inside your head. If right now, in that context, whatever it was, career, relationship, life, whatever it was wherever it is that you're thinking of, if I was to ask you right now to decide between number 1 and number 2, which one do you feel the pull towards? So imagine that you could get all of number 1, but none of number 2, or all of number 2, but none of number 1. It's still the same. A lot of people at this point, when I ask them to actually make the decision, start to find that actually they get drawn towards something that they weren't expecting. So, all of a sudden they thought it was trust and freedom. And oh yeah, trust is always number 1 for me. It's the biggest thing for me. And then I say, well, in the context of a relationship, do you really want trust or do you really want freedom? If I had to ask you to choose which one's the most important, and they start going, and they can feel that freedom. Okay, it's nice to have trust, but really what I want to do is I want to be free. I want you to do that with your whole list. Just compare them all off against each other. Just make sure that if you had to choose between that one and that one, just compare them down. Would they still be the same? And what you'll find is that your list will take an order. This is an exercise that can take sometimes, if I do it with a client, it can take 45 minutes. I've just explained it to you in 10. That's why I'm asking you to stop the video a couple of times, because it can be a very useful thing to do. But we're coming to the end of it now. So what I want you to do is, I want you just to continue with this exercise. I want you to find out what your values are. How can you know how to properly make a decision if you don't know what your decision-making process is? It's a massive thing to be able to know what your own values are. For instance, I know that one of my top values is that things should be easy. Things need to be easy. Now, this is great when it comes to training, when it comes to writing books, when it comes to working with clients as a coach, when it comes to all of these things. Because you know what? I am motivated massively to make things easy. I want things to be so simple that actually anyone can understand it, regardless of age, knowledge, experience, anything like that. It's probably why I work with so many young children. I work with a lot of young children as young as 10, sometimes as young as 7, sometimes even younger than that. Because I can explain the concepts of the mind in an easy way. Where does this start to get in the way? Well, this gets in the way when all of a sudden I have to do something like my accounts. Which isn't always easy. Where are things? Where did I put those bundle of receipts? Where is that? And all of a sudden I'm always thinking there must be an easier way. There must be an easier way. But sometimes there's not. Sometimes you just have to do it. And I'll feel pain when I'm doing these things that I find are more difficult than they should be. So this is exactly how we use them. This is exactly, that knowledge can help me, because I'm always on the lookout for somebody that can give me an easier way to do it. When I used to struggle and strain my way through all sorts of stuff until I found that actually, for instance, let's use my accounts as an example, the easiest way for me to do my accounts was to give it to someone who loved doing it. And that's exactly what I did. It was well worth the money for me to bring someone in. Let me ask you, especially if you're somebody who at the moment is doing something that you know there's somebody out there that could do for you. If I could say to you just now, if you give me that amount of money, however much it would cost, I'll take it off you. You'll never have to do it again. Will you do it? Let me give you an example. Just a very quick example before we come to the end of this video. Ironing your clothes, right? Every weekend. Ironing services tend to cost maybe, let's say that you are doing 5 shirts a week or 5 blouses a week for work, right? Let's just imagine that as an instance. I don't know what you do for your work, but you get the idea. And therefore they charge you £2 a garment. And you think about all the stress that you go through thinking about having to iron all the clothes and do all that stuff. I don't know what an ironing service charges. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is, if I was to say to you, pay me £100 and I guarantee you no more of that stress, and I would fix you in the head so that ironing was the most amount of fun ever, would you want to do it? I find actually that a lot of people would be going, do you know what, that's well worth the investment. I'm going to pay you that money. Well, why wouldn't you just pay it to someone that could do it for you? I hope you get my idea. I'm not saying to you to go and give your ironing to someone. All I'm saying is that sometimes once you know your values, it makes it easier to make decisions. And it makes it easier for you to understand yourself and therefore accept that you are who you are, you do what you do, you like what you like, and therefore you find how to motivate yourself. Anyway, the key points of today and the things that I really want you to remember. Number 1, it's okay to be you. Number 2, you're not broken. Your mind is working absolutely perfectly, even if it's not doing what you want it to do, because, of course, everything that happens in your mind, number 3, everything that happens in your mind is there for a positive purpose. Everything is trying to help, even the little arguing devil and angel inside your head. If you can find out that actually the way that they're trying to help is that they're trying to achieve the same thing just by 2 opposite behaviours, then perhaps you can achieve balance. And number 4, and finally, it's important to know yourself. So take the time. Grab a pen and a paper and ask yourself, what's important about that area of your life? The woman with the Jaffa cakes, by the way, with the biscuits, you know, that she was hiding, it took half an hour to achieve some balance inside her head, to show her that actually what she was wanting from those biscuits was actually something positive. And all of a sudden, by finding the balance, what we could do is we could stop these extremes of behaviour. Everything could come back together. And once everything comes back together, it all balanced out. It wasn't extreme anymore. It was like, well, she could have one or she couldn't. She came back to see me the next week. Like, I cannot believe the difference. Already, I've stopped. She's like, I had one the other night because it was nice. And that's been it. Interesting. What if it was possible for you to achieve all of these things as easy as her? As easy as she did. And all you need to do is just take the time to learn and understand yourself a little bit more. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope that it's been useful. Thank you for sticking with me for the hour. I hope it's been interesting and fun. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. And I'm going to speak to you once more. And video 3 is on its way. And what you're going to be able to do is, in that one, we're going to go for a dive into someone else's bubble, which should, I'm hoping, be fun. Until then, keep doing good things. I'm Brian Costello. Hope you're enjoying the book, and I'm going to speak to you soon. Bye.